Um, the purpose of the series is to invite our community to share an open talk, to read our perspective about the SDG through languages and cultures approach. By focusing on language and culture, our community can interact with relevant initiatives to move towards a more just society and multilingual and multicultural community. The webinar today is about the goal number 4, which is related to quality education. To guide this discussion, we have two professors, Antonio Pérez Núñez and Professor José Luis Poblete. Professor Antonio Pérez is Professor of Hispanic Studies of Charleston College, and Professor Poblete is teacher of translation career here in SAT. And the idea is to compare two different perspectives of our local Chilean welcome. The idea is to contrast two different perspectives, the Chilean one and North American one, to have points in common or maybe points on the contrary. And the idea is to compare, share, and have a good time between both universities. So welcome, teacher Antonio. You are allowed to start.
All right, thank you, Fernanda. I'm going to share my PowerPoint presentation with you all. So yeah, here, first I'm thrilled to be part of this webinar, to work with you all. And here today I wanted to share some work that I've been doing to promote intercultural competence in my university at College Charleston. So this is research work that I've done. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the study itself, the virtual exchange between my students and students in Spain, and share some data that I collected and talk about my experience. So yeah, let's start with the title. It's promoting intercultural competence development and communication through asynchronous video-based interaction between foreign language learners and native speakers. And here's the study outline. So I will start with the introduction, talk a little bit about intercultural competence, virtual exchanges, the research motivation.
Aló, Mauricio. Sí, de todas maneras.
Okay, and then the study with the participants, methodology, instruments that I used, and I'll talk a little bit about the results discussion, show some samples of the students' work, and the findings, conclusions, and there will be some time for questions. So why intercultural competence? Right, so there are many initiatives nowadays, right? In the US, ACTFL, in Europe, the Council of Europe, or initiatives like this one, where we're here today, right? That has highlighted the need for students to engage in meaningful intercultural communication, to prepare them to interact with the world community at home and abroad, right? Because for the good or the bad, we are in a very interconnected world where we all interact, and in many cases we work together, and it's important for our students to be ready for that. That's one of the goals of education. And in my context, in my field, in second language acquisition and foreign language education, so it's part of the communicative competence. It's one of the areas, as we can see here. It's not just linguistic competence or discourse, it's not just communicating, but the interaction with the people and being ready for that. And it's also the intersection between communication and cultures. That's interculturality. And intercultural competence is a complex construct, and there are many definitions, but there's agreement among researchers that it consists of a set of attitudes, knowledge, skills, and awareness needed in order to. For this study, I'm using Byram's model of intercultural communicative competence, ICC. So the challenge, I like to start with the idea, with the background of the study, right? So the challenge. So nowadays, people across the world, we communicate and interact through videos, right? We use WhatsApp and many different video platforms, and we exchange videos. And the type is asynchronous, right? We record something and then we share it, and then someone watches later, or can also share with someone else. And the idea, what I wanted to do is to examine this question: how can instructors use mobile devices, smartphones, for example, and user-generated video content to develop virtual exchanges and promote collaboration between LT learners and native speakers, with the goal of developing intercultural competence and communication. And the framework that I used, as I said, is Byram's, and we talked about a set of areas and competences. The first one is attitudes. And according to Byram, so attitudes refers to openness and curiosity, as well as readiness to consider other viewpoints and cultures without judgment. So the ability to suspend your beliefs, right? Have an open mind. Then knowledge is the linguistic and cultural information necessary to participate in intercultural communication. And it can be knowledge of social groups, interactions, products, practices from your own culture and other people's culture. Skills. According to Byram's, there are two types of skills that can be developed. The first one is the skills of interpreting and relating, which is the ability to interpret a cultural artifact from another culture and to explain them and relate them to your own culture. The skills of discovery and interaction, which is the ability to acquire new knowledge through interaction. Byram talks about real-time communication, but nowadays we have both, right, all the time, real-time and also asynchronous. And the last area is critical cultural awareness, which is the ability to critically evaluate practices and products in one's own culture or other cultures. And this one is usually developed, one good way is through reflections, having students to reflect on their experiences, compare, contrast, which is a key component also in the ACTFL framework in the United States for foreign language education. So a little bit about virtual exchanges. Researchers agree that classroom instruction alone is not enough, sufficient to develop intercultural competence. And one way to achieve this is through, in order to achieve this, you need to interact with native speakers. That's how this happens. And there's been a lot of research on the development of intercultural competence in study abroad context, because that was the idea. Okay, so if you live in a foreign country or in a intercultural competence, well, okay, that may not happen. And then one method that's growing in terms of attention is the use of virtual exchanges to connect the students with native speakers using technology, right? And this can be done asynchronous through synchronous means, non-real time, or synchronous real-time communication. So here I'm going to be focusing on asynchronous communication, and Professor Poblete will talk about his work with synchronous communication means for a virtual exchange. So virtual exchanges. So since I'm talking about asynchronous communication, I'm going to talk about the goodness of asynchronous communication, but synchronous communication is also very valid and has a lot of good things. However, you need to be committed to a specific time period, same time, same, in order to talk. And because it's synchronous, real time, so you don't have so much time to reflect or prepare whatever you're going to be talking about. So if we're referring to foreign language exchanges, so in lower levels, the students might need time to reflect or come prepared to a conversation, or might not have the proficiency necessary, and still might be technically unreliable in terms of connection and issues with, I don't know, you may run out of battery while you're talking to someone, right? However, asynchronous communication, so you don't need the commitment to a specific time period, and you can prepare whatever you need to do. If it's a video, you can record it, you can delete it, you can redo it, retake it, and prepare. So that gives a lot of possibilities for second language work for students to develop, to create something. And this is something completely new to my knowledge. Is the first research work on the impact of mobile enhanced virtual exchanges. And some of the good things with this that can provide, one is to help language learners connect them to their own environment. So you have your phone like here, and you can go outside and record something and share it. While in synchronous communication, you're with your laptop, you're seeing the other person, but you're enclosed, right? You cannot share where you are, what you do. And because of that, if you create an exchange with access to different people, stories, videos, environments, so it's going to be more diverse, and you're going to have more things at the same time, more information. And also allows the possibility of integrating mobile assisted language learning, which is called MOL, which is growing. And however, this type of MOL apps are usually tutorial MOLs, like Duolingo, or like using Kahoot. These tools that you use your phone, but it's just to learn, develop accuracy, and very linguistically oriented. And this is more about connecting people, okay? So study purpose and research questions. So the purpose was to explore the use of mobile enhanced synchronous communication to support virtual exchanges. And the second one, to analyze the extent to which this type of exchange can promote intercultural learning and communication. And more specifically, the first research question asks whether mobile enhanced communication can, through Flipgrid, can support virtual exchanges. And then I collected data in order to examine, find out whether this type of exchange promoted the development of intercultural competence, comparing the students who were engaged in the exchange and students in a traditional foreign language class. So I compared the data, and we're going to see that later. Participants and the task, methodology, and instruments. So the participants, so here they are. So on the left, these are my students, and these are the students in Spain. They were enrolled in my first year experience class. So they were first semester students, very young, and their proficiency level was around beginners. It was a third semester foreign language class, and it was a 3-month virtual exchange with the students from Malaga, Spain, and they were enrolled in a business and entrepreneurship course. And they were excited to be part of the exchange because they were going to do like a sort of trip to LA, to the US. And so the And this was developed in the context of a collaborative online international learning course that I developed with this other instructor, Patricia Santos. So here is Charleston, East Coast, South Carolina, and then Malaga, southern Spain, home of birthplace of Picasso and Antonio Banderas. Okay. So the methodology, the tasks. So I put together, we created activities to structure the exchanges and prepare students, and everything was like pretty, yeah, there was a lot of preparation involved, a lot of work. Okay, and I'm going to share it with you all now. The first part was the preparation activities, because after all, the students were there learning Spanish. So in order to communicate, they needed to have access to vocabulary, grammar, and use that on in their exchanges with the Spanish students. And the second part was the video content creation and exchange on Flipgrid with the students. Probably by now, if not, I mean, you're probably familiar with Flipgrid. If not, I'm going to talk a little bit about it and why I used it as a platform for the exchange. And then the third part, which is key to develop intercultural competence according to the available research, were the reflections that the students had to write. And there were a total of 8 online exchanges. And these are the topics that they worked on. The first one, greetings, because you're meeting new people online. So one way it's through greetings, and there are also differences, cultural differences in the way people greet in different countries and cultures, right? And then these are exploring my context, education, technology and society, social issues, health, food and eating, and environment and sustainability, an array of topics that we thought would be of interest for the students and also important in their world, right? So this is one example. This was the first set of activities that we created, the saludos y despedidas. So here there was the goal for each activity using ATFL. Vocabulary, I tried to use, sort of process instruction by Van Patten, pretty much scaffolding. So starting with vocabulary and then building up using certain structures that they could later use. So paso uno, first step, saludar, despedirse, how people do it, and then talking to a partner in class and using that vocabulary and other vocabulary that would come up. Then step 2, paso dos, asking questions, como saludas a tus amigos, les doy un abrazo. Also using key structures. Interacción cultural, paso 3, they were asked to create a video on Flipgrid doing that. And that video would be shared with the students. Salud y despedida entre amigos, with friends, family, and teachers, professors. And this is Flipgrid. If you're not familiar, this is it's a platform where the instructor creates these great topics, and the students can use a link and upload their videos. And here we have the different topics: saludos en España, presentaciones, explorando mi contexto, and all the students have access to all the videos. So there's a bunch of information from their peers. And I have an example here of what the students did for this first activity, the saludos y despedidas, students in the US, students in Spain, and we can see the differences. So let me know what you. Okay.
Salud.
Can you hear the video?
Entre amigos.
Yeah.
Despedida. entre amigos.
Saludo entre familia.
So you're able to see the video, right?
I mean, we can just hear it. I cannot see the video.
I hear it. Okay,
Right,
so
I
I'm
can hear
gonna yeah, I'm gonna share. I'm gonna make here. Okay, so yeah, this is the video.
And now I can see it.
Despedida entre familia.
Saludo con profesor.
Okay, and then we can see the contrast with the Spanish students.
Con la abuela. Con tus padres. Hola, mamá.
See, so that was the first video, and then after that they have to reflect on what they saw using a prompt I gave them. Let's see, sure, we're back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so back. Yeah, a few more steps. So watch videos from the students and see if you can find differences, similarities, differences, and the one of the most important parts, the reflection. I also used ACTFL guidelines to create the prompts and so that asked them to write the reflection in Spanish or English, with their family, friends, teachers, similarities, differences, also for them to reflect about how they would feel. Would you feel comfortable, uncomfortable in this type of interaction? Would you go on and try to behave in a way that to fit with the people there? And so this was the model, the framework that I used for the activities. I have more samples that I would be happy to share later, but because of the limited time. Okay, this was another activity. This was about education. Okay, and they have to do the preparation activities and then record the video, and a few more samples from what this the students did. Explorando mi contexto. So this was for the students to show where they live, what they do, and in order to take advantage of what you can do with your phone. So here we have Madeline.
Hola. Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to, okay, so you can say it. Here we go.
Tienes US residencia estudiante. San Patricio. Mi cama. Mi escritorio. Mi armario. Es de mi compañero de cuarto, pero.
You can see the differences. Yeah, she's definitely more tidy. Okay, so yeah, that was the recording from the students in the US in Charleston, and this one in Malaga.
Hola chicos, yo estoy aquí desde el balcón de mi ventana y os voy a enseñar las vistas que hay desde mi calle. Yo vivo en esta avenida y tengo estas vistas. Y ahora en un momento pues voy a bajar a pasear.
Yeah, and then she's gonna take her dog for a walk. So yeah, really, yeah, I think it was really cool.
Y aquí está mi calle.
See, and then the students in the US, they can see what Malaga looks like, or a place like thousands of kilometers away, and get to know. And then she's saying that she goes to school by bus, which also gives the option to talk about public transportation, and many different topics and things that might be different in the US. And here we have more examples that if we have time we could watch later, or you can see later if after sharing this presentation. Muy bien. Okay. Okay, there we go. All right, so one of the good things about Flipgrid, it's the modern looking the way that it looks, right? That it resembles social media apps that students are very used to, right? So data collection. So apart from while conducting this exchange, I wanted to also collect data in order to be able to like share some research evidence about the effects and impact of this type of exchange. So I use pre-post questionnaire surveys that I gave the students before and after the exchange, that were designed using the areas of intercultural competence that we saw earlier by Bayram. And I used a scale from 1 to 7, strongly disagree, strongly agree, and then students were asked to describe, to explain why. Okay, if they gave up 6, 7, whatever, so please explain using examples from your current class. So I run the statistics, and then for the pre-tests, there were no significant differences between the exchange group and the control group in terms of attitudes, knowledge, and skills, and so on. And then for the post-tests, I wanted to compare the exchange group with the control group, and here we have some data, and with the questions that we use. So my curiosity and interest in Hispanic cultures have increased. And that was at the end of the semester, at the end of the course. So we have the control group, the traditional foreign language class, and the exchange. Here in green, these 3 questions are for attitudes, knowledge, and blue, skills of interpreting and relating. So the means, the highest was a 7, let's go back, and we can see the differences in the means in all areas. The exchange group outperformed the control group, and these differences, once you run the t-test and so on, they came significant. Okay, and so the students, so pretty much around 6 or over above 6, I agree, strongly agree, and then the students pretty low. So my knowledge and interest about Hispanic people and cultures has increased. So most people in the control group were in disagreement with that. So yeah, this is the quantitative result. I believe that there was a significant positive impact. And the other skills of discovery and interaction, critical cultural awareness, we find the same trend. The students reported higher gains in their ability to acquire new knowledge, understanding of differences, observe new aspects, evaluate practices. And then there was the general question. My ability to communicate effectively and properly with people of Hispanic cultures has increased. So we can see that pretty much double the control group. And then, so quantitative and qualitative data, some comments from students that I wanted to share with you. This one, for example, in Jennifer's video, she mentioned that they do not have standardized tests. This surprised me because growing up in the US, there has always been mandatory standardized tests ever since elementary school. Yeah, it's crazy. The thing with mandatory, with standardized tests in the US, students have PTSD because of that. It's always test after test. And this one on social issues, one student said, since the Spaniards, both young and older, invested in the social issues, made me desire to learn more about the social issues within the United States. On food and eating. In the US, I feel like the idea of eating together as a family has faded. And while we are eating, we're using the phone or have headphones on. That's what they got from the videos that they watched. And remember, the goal was to hopefully help them develop attitude, skills, and knowledge. And I believe through these comments and other comments and the quantitative data that we just saw, there's plenty of evidence indicating that this helped the students develop the areas of intercultural communicative competence. And conclusions. So the first research questions, remember, it was, can mobile enhanced asynchronous communication through Flipgrid be used to support virtual exchanges? I believe that yes, right? And I like these two comments from students. One said, you can always look up information about the differences between education and greetings in the US and Spain, but it's such a different experience when these students create these Flipgrids with intentions that US students will be viewing them, about the interaction between the two groups. And the second one, it also feels like a relationship because these aren't random strangers. They're our pen pal friends, and it makes everything feel more real. So yeah, this one was particularly interesting because maybe 10, 20 years ago, no one would have said, okay, you exchange videos with someone and then you develop like a connection or proximity. But nowadays, a lot of people do that. You go on YouTube or you watch TikTok videos or your favorite YouTuber, influencer, whatever, and then you kind of develop a relationship, like some sort of closeness, right, with that person. And then come virtual exchanges involving asynchronous mobile-based communication between the students, help promote the development of intercultural competence. I believe there's plenty of evidence, so that would be also a yes. And just to conclude and share a little bit of the things that I learned from this experience with other instructors and people interested in virtual exchanges. So the first one, so yeah, get ready to invest plenty of time and plan ahead, okay, to create activities, prompts, give feedback to students. One of the key components of virtual exchanges is to have a common curriculum. The exchanges need to be part of the curriculum. And so you need to check and provide feedback for the Flipgrid videos, coordinate and work with your partner, topics, deadlines, the student responses. You need to have that figured out because otherwise, it's gonna end up not well. And this is an important one. Be aware of differences in academic calendars. The academic calendar in the US and Spain is different. The holidays, vacations, the beginning, end. Even if you want to do a semester exchange, you cannot do that because of differences. In Spain, students start the semester later, around like end of September. In the US, we start mid-August. So that's and then we have Thanksgiving, we have fall break, and so on and so forth. When designing your activities, I would suggest using backwards design. So starting with the end. What's the goal? What's the the end goal? What is what students are gonna do? In this case, videos, right? So you design the activity based on that goal. And the outcome, I use the actual standards to have something to say, okay, so also for the students, like, look, if you do this, you are going to be able to achieve this. And assessment evidence. In this case, the assessment evidence were the videos and the reflections. And you have to plan the learning and the instruction accordingly. And these are some of the things to consider, recommendations, things that I learned. And for future research, as I said, this type of exchanges are new to my knowledge. This is the first study, like collecting data and reporting on this type of exchange that I called mobile enhanced virtual exchange. And so there are new and exciting opportunities for exchanges and intercultural communication. So for future research, some ideas. So doing the exchanges with different proficiency levels. The students were low proficiency students, beginners. So of course, the results might be different with students with in higher proficiency levels. Also, there were some comments. There was this comment from this student who said, I think something like, I put a lot of effort working on like I focused on my pronunciation because I didn't want to sound dumb. So there might be some motivation or something because you want to do well, so that might help develop maybe your speaking or your listening, because the students in Spain that were using their Andalusian accent, and some of them, they were like, I didn't understand anything. So that will probably have an effect, an impact, right? And so how about conducting these exchanges in other fields and disciplines? For example, biology students, or in other fields with peers from other countries and cultures. And same thing, other contexts, countries, etc. I would love to continue doing this as part of the COIL, the Collaborative International International Learning. And so if someone is interested, hit me up, send me an email, and if I cannot do it, I might be able to find someone at College Charleston to work with you, because I believe, and also from the data that I shared with you, that this can have a huge impact on students, and I think it's really nice. So that's all for now, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Antonio. We are going to continue with Professor Jose Luis Poblete. He's going to present part of his job.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Antonio. It's always good to see, like exchanges between students, especially when they're from other countries, And actually, we're going to have a conversation, I think, afterwards, right? So now I'm going to share, let's say, my experience, let's say, in terms of, let's say, an ongoing project or something that we're experiencing here. And actually, one of the people who are here, let's say, attending is Kevin. So Kevin, and I'm going to explain, let's say, his role within this initiative. So in this case, it's going to be a little different. I don't know if can you see my screen? Yeah, okay, good. So, well, I work in a translation program here in Chile, and also it's always a challenge, like Antonio said, trying to develop intercultural competence, because we can do this in different ways. We can do this, in a virtual way by just watching a video, but it's going to be different from, interacting with real people. So this sort of collaboration, came about in basically some conversations with Kevin, who's here. And I'm going to explain what we're going to be doing. So let's say, in a way, I need to give you some context, let's say, how things work. Because Antonio, for example, he's in the US, but now I'm in Chile. Like, actually, we're very far, and it's super hot here right now. I think the temperature is like 96 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's super hot here. And let's say, just to give you some context. So, like I said, I teach in a translation studies program. And here this presents, let's say, some challenges, of course, but also, let's say, some opportunities. So like I said, I'm here in Santiago, Chile, in the capital city. we need to understand that this is a monolingual context. So let's say almost everybody here speaks Spanish. So here students, the challenge that they are presented with is that they have to develop their translation competence and also their language skills. So let's say this is something that we cannot control because this varies. Some of them are very proficient in some languages, some of them are not. So let's say since they are part of this monolingual context where they have to develop their translation competence, like I said, along with languages, in this case, it's going to be either English. I mean, not either. They have to learn English. The options are either Japanese or Portuguese. So they study like both language pairs, English, Japanese, or English, Portuguese. So like I said, this context makes it special in a way, and also a little bit more difficult because of let's say of our context, and since Chile is let's say very far away. Just to give you a broad idea of what translation is, because it's connected here. Let's say lots of people also simplify the process of translating. Some people might think that this just basically taking a text and just changing the words, looking up the words in the dictionary and find an equivalent. But there is also, this is an act of communication, so the idea would be to how to transform a text and interpret it, let's say, for other people. And that's why, let's say, if we think of translators, we can think of them as being intercultural mediators, because here it's not only the idea of mastering the source and the target language, but also the idea of the translator that he or she has to be able to be part of this world as an intercultural mediator. For that, they need to understand how culture works. So that's why initiatives like the one that Antonio just presented is very interesting, because it's different from seeing somebody walking the dog, from basically telling or see or just discussing that people walk their dog, which is something pretty cool just seeing, and especially a city like Malaga. And how can this be achieved? How can we achieve this? The idea of the intercultural mediator, or how interculturalism is going to be part of this. For this, I think we'll just have to, let's say, make some differences. The first thing is like that we have intercultural competence, and I don't know if in intercultural communicative competence. And I don't know if Antonio agrees with me. In the first part, this would be like part of your context, Antonio, like where people will have to, let's say, interact in their own language. For example, here in the case that you work in the US, people will have to try to use English, and try to see how the culture works there. So that's, let's say, what they will have to do. And in the case of, let's say, in our context here in Chile, it would be like that people will have to interact, let's say, with people from other countries and in a foreign language. So that would be the case of Chile. Well, let's say where students learn English as a foreign language, not as a second language. So in this case, we have two different contexts. So that's why it would be like the challenge I was mentioning before, which is, developing language skills, both language skills and, the translator competence in this monolingual context, which is a little different. So that's why it's important to have activities in order, let's say, to develop intercultural communicative competence. And again, the question, how can this be achieved? How can we achieve this? And then, ideally, that's something that Antonio also mentioned, is basically by talking to people, from other cultures, people who don't speak your first language, or maybe who are learning, let's say, that target language. So that would be like one of the main ideas, like people interacting directly. And I think Flipgrid and what Antonio was presenting was a very interesting idea. But again, this is something, for example, without an initiative like Antonio's, it would be very difficult for students to find a group, for example, and also for students here in Chile to find a group, let's say, to interact with. It's always, the idea is like you need to interact with other people, with, for example, native speakers or non-native speakers, but where to find them, right? So that's why we need to create these opportunities, in a more, conscious way, like creating, developing, and also in the case of Antonio and myself, where we have the access to, let's say, courses and, where we teach people, we can actually, let's say, try to have some sort of connection, and maybe Antonio's teaching there, I'm teaching here, and then we can try to find a way to collaborate. So that's why, it's not always easy to find, people to interact with. And like I said, in the case of Chile, the monolingual context, where students have to develop their translation competence and also their language skills. So, and here we're also going to include the cultural, or culture competence, let's say, to all these areas in a more, in this specific context, right? So that's why we have started with some initiatives here at the University of Santiago. One of them was to invite Professor David Wright from the University of Nottingham-Trent University, England. The idea would be like for him to not only share his expertise, but also, let's say, for his students to. It would have been different, for example, in this case, just to ask Professor David Wright, to record 3 videos. That would have been, like an hour long. But it was different for them to interact with him. So when they have like, questions in real time, so they can just like, and also just talk to him. And that's, let's say, in this workshop, I was there as a moderator, but Professor White was conducting all the workshops. So we did this in 2020 and 2021. So we're planning, let's say, to do this next year again. But here the idea would be like interacting with people, like something that also that Antonio mentioned, like it's different from doing this, even though like the activities could be asynchronous, you're seeing real people basically, which is, let's say, another key element, of course. Let's say the challenge here, of course, is having students interact with teachers, experts, and students from other countries, in order to develop intercultural communicative, competence. How can we do this? And that's why, here, of course, the pandemic was something that was not, it was pretty sad for lots of people, but it also, let's say, presented us with many challenges. Here we had to learn, probably, Antonio, you thought of exploring options because of the pandemic, how to teach, how to look for, I don't know, maybe Flipgrid was, or, some maybe like what we're using now, Zoom, many challenges, but also it gave us a lot of opportunities, to open a university. Actually, yeah, many schools as well to the world, and invite people, to give webinars, to, give presentations, and basically to welcome people from, and also ideas and challenges, and ideas and projects from, and opportunities from many other, let's say, countries, So basically the idea in this course that I'm teaching this semester, and I think Kevin is here, it's an elective course. And yeah, we just had this idea with Kevin Garrick, who's here. And I would like to publicly thank him because he's been, very kind as to share his time with us, and also because of the time difference. So because he's based in England, he is finishing his PhD in Lancaster University. So the idea for, let's say, my idea was basically to say, okay, Kevin, I would like to invite you to teach part of this course and share your expertise and your ideas with my class. Kevin was, let's say, very kind, and he said, yes, of course, let's say we can do that. And the idea here, of course, and this was a little bit, at the beginning, I was thinking, but maybe students are going to feel, a little threatened because it's going to be a synchronous session. Students tend to, sometimes like turn off their camera. So we try to do this in let's say, in a friendly way. So Kevin, you can see your picture here. So thank you very much again. And like I said, Kevin is finishing his PhD in linguistics at Lancaster University in the UK in corpus linguistics. So how does this work? So this is something that also that Antonio mentioned, which is, you need time for this, because you have to be meeting regularly with people and say, okay, how are we doing? Maybe there is, like Antonio said, there is a holiday, there is something that maybe there's a holiday in Spain, there is a holiday in the US, and there are things that we cannot control. Maybe, something happens and class is canceled or it gets moved, So that's why the idea is like to try to talk and, to plan, some interventions in some of the materials. Kevin has been, sending some of his presentations, some feedback, but also the idea here is basically that Kevin starts becoming part of the class. I mean, he's now part of the class, but this has been a gradual process, It was, class, this is Kevin. Kevin was like, hello, hey, how are you? And then Kevin started showing some tools, and then he just started teaching some full sessions. But because it would have been a little bit maybe more threatening, to organize this in a different way. So that's why, let's say me, Jose, I was teaching, let's say, some initial sessions, some, let's say, the introduction, and also some theory and practice. And then I say, okay, now Kevin is going to be teaching some other sessions. There was an introductory session, and now he taught, let's say, 7 sessions, sorry, and actually he had a meeting with my student on Tuesday to see how they're working on a specific project, So in everything, it's now, for example, if student cannot go to class, they can watch it later, let's say on YouTube. And how did we organize this? The first thing was basically a survey, also maybe something that the challenge that maybe we can discuss, Antonio, later, is that we expect our students to know a lot about technology, but sometimes what's the technology for us, it's a little different from technologies for our students, like not TikTok, but actually, websites or, tools that can actually, help them develop some specific skills. Another thing was like, okay, so Kevin and I was like, okay, we can use these tools, we're going to choose these tools. We're going to develop some different types of or we're going to be using some different types of corpora, some types of class activities. And now students are currently working on their final project. And let's say to gather more data, at the end, there's going to be a writing task, like a final reflection, or we're going to gather, let's say, some of the impressions, like, let's say, similarly to what Antonio was showing, some of the ideas, and also I would like to ask to know their impressions of having Kevin, who has been, an excellent tutor and teacher. And like I said, how did this work? So let's say, on the contrary, we have synchronous sessions via Zoom. So Kevin connects a specific time. Now he has the link and everything. And also students, of course, have that. Google Forms, let's say for the survey. YouTube, we have a YouTube channel. So I always tell my students, don't forget to like and subscribe, even though I have like, I don't know, 14 subscribers, but it's something more educational. And so Kevin has been sharing some tutorials and explaining, and also that's also let's say something good. Even though it's a synchronous session, the students, like I said, they can watch the session later. Especially software requires some specific steps, installing the software, loading the corpora, and sometimes like instructions may be a little bit difficult to follow. So that's why Kevin, it's important always to record the sessions and share them with the students so they can watch them later. So because as you can see, there are tools, even though they look like hacking tools, they're just for gathering text or analyzing text, and condenser, for example, but they require time, and so that's why it's a very good idea to to in a way install them, use them yourself, so it can be a little bit easier. This is an example of a session where Kevin was teaching the synchronous class. He was just explaining, let's say, one of the activities in class. But again, it's always very important for students to go to class and also to see and also to interact with Kevin, or in this case, it can be with any professor. And let's say, and something also like Antonio mentioned, the idea would be to try, that students go through this experiential learning, that they have to experience, language, and also that to reflect and say, okay, was this good for me? Did I learn anything new? Or was it better than just having a regular class, with, in this case, Professor Antonio and Professor Jose? Was it, much more fun? Or did I learn more? Because it doesn't necessarily have to be like super fun, but, also in the case of Antonio, we could see that it had an impact on the scores, like people understanding how things work in terms of, for example, greetings. And let's say, and my idea has always been, that students can have classes with other English-speaking professionals, teachers. Sometimes they can be from other countries, but it's always, let's say, a good idea for them to interact, even though I know that this can generate anxiety because, students, when they're learning languages, it's a little bit complicated for them to use the language because they are scared or because they feel anxious. And what happens if the person does not understand me, especially like at this level, well, students need to be language professionals, right? Also, in terms of culture, probably students here in Chile, we have a friendly relationship, but of course we have to draw a line, but in the case of maybe foreign professors or foreign teachers, in terms of politeness, they have to use other types of language. So they also need to be aware of that. And also, of course, using their language skills, which is, and of course, in terms of culture, because everything in a way is related. The way they interact with Kevin, the way that they send, each other emails and let's say, and things like that. And also, let's say, some advantages or some positive things that I can see from this experience, of course, is that students have the chance to use their language skills, which is also, let's say, something that is important, like in the case of Antonio, because it would be just different from them, to American students using Spanish with you, which is of course practice, but it's much more different when they actually have to be exposed to, trying to practice language in a more meaningful way. And also, let's say, the tools in terms of corpus linguistics, that Kevin is showing them. It's also going to help them in the future careers as translators. And also at the beginning, probably they were a little quiet, but now they talk to Kevin more. So in terms of self-esteem, this has increased, and they actually tell me about that self-perception, that they are actually capable of interacting in a second language. They are more confident as well. And also, like something that we're going to discuss with Antonio, probably technological skills, because actually they have to install software and use it. And now we talk about some specific functions, and now they know what we're talking about, because in the past it was basically that we were explaining, we had to explain things. Actually, I had to explain things many times. And also, since they have to carry out the research project, they also have to talk to, Kevin and myself, to develop their research skills, and because they have to prepare, and this is something that they will have to be doing when they become translators, in terms of doing research because of a specific topic and things like that. But of course, there are some drawbacks or disadvantages. And in this case, something that we can see, or something that I would like to mention, is probably something that Antonio also mentioned, that this requires a lot of coordination. It's time consuming. But again, there are platforms that can help us, manage our time, but it requires, emails or messages, or, and also like something that has access to technology. And also, like, sometimes we have this idea that students know a lot about technology, but sometimes it depends. So some of them are very good, at using technology. Some of them don't know so much about it. So I think this requires, a little bit of training. Let's say, what next? Since Kevin is here, yeah, of course, we would like to do something again next year, but maybe with other courses. And of course, that Kevin at some point can actually come here and work with us in Santiago, so can actually be here, and Antonio as well. So come to Chile, and of course, it can be something, let's say, much more fun. Final projects, that's just something that students are working on. And of course, here, this is going to be key for us to make some changes, and, for students to see and feel if they worked, let's say, if all the things that we planned worked, or if they would like to include something a little bit more, much more effective. And also, yeah, I would like to talk to the students and see if they would like to do this in the future. And then maybe that's something I would like to ask Antonio later, like his experience, if he's going to repeat this or not. And then I have some questions for you, Antonio, and probably you have some for me. So, and in terms of, let's say, collaboration, maybe include some other courses, like I'd say, include some other people. But again, it's more difficult to coordinate because of, different time zones, or, different, like you said, academic calendars, which is something that can be a little challenging. And this is a picture of the class working, even though I see some of them working on their phones. No, that's fine. They were using, the computer lab. And this is an elective course. So, the course, it tends to be small. I think there are just like 6 or 7 students. Well, in this case, there are like 7, but I think this is the full house, or maybe I think one student is missing. But, that you can see that it's good for them to have me in the classroom, and they have to talk to Kevin, so it's like they are working with 2 teachers at the same time, but one of them is in the classroom. They can ask me questions, and I just force them to talk to Kevin. But now they're more used to that. So I think it's been a very good initiative. So Kevin, again, thank you very much. And yeah, if you have any questions, comments, and ideas, that's my email address, jose.poblete.b@usach.cl. And again, thank you very much for the invitation. And yeah, I don't know, maybe Antonio has a question. Maybe I have some questions for you, but yeah, I don't know how we can organize that, Fernanda. So thank you very much, Antonio, and thank you, Fernanda, for the invitation.
Thanks. I want to say that I hope we can repeat maybe on the future, but I have the idea that at the beginning of the pandemic, it was very hard to you to try to maybe force students to work and try to interact and have communication to each other's by a screen is very different if we compare to having a class face-to-face. So to continue with the line of this webinar, I would like to ask you, how can language in this context, the language training contribute to have an inclusive and a quality education related to the topic that everyone talks about? I'd like to know, but I'd like to hear the two ideas. I don't know who is going first.
Antonio, would you like to, if we go in alphabetical order, maybe you should start.
Okay, so yeah, so what you're asking how language, could you repeat the question? So how language
how can language training in this context, we are talking about the students, but if we talk about teachers, how can language training in terms of teachers can contribute to have a quality education of second language acquisition?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, in the context of, yeah, I think it's also related to what Professor Jose said. If we're talking about the development of intercultural communicative competence, it goes together with the development of your language skills. So they go together. So obviously it's fundamental. However, what sort of I found and showed in my study, my work, is that even with students with, who are not so proficient, they can still develop that. And there are things that you can do in your first language, such as reflecting. So according to some researchers, they say that it's best to use your first language for reflections, because that way you can really think in more depth and think through the different questions related to intercultural learning, knowledge, your interactions, and so on and so forth. Yeah, hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Antonio. Yeah, I mean, and also I think, well, it's key to have students, let's say, use the language. That's why, let's say, initiatives like, like something that I really liked about Antonio's, initiative is basically that. Because, I mean, if we're honest, Antonio, you don't have to do that. And I don't have to ask Kevin to, to teach some sessions. We could just teach classes in the regular way. But if we would like to have something more meaningful and something that students can actually maybe interact with other people from other cultures, it's key, to have, initiatives like the one that you were presenting, and also that maybe inviting some let's say, other people. So that's why, because in this case, language, and that's something that, students sometimes complain, that they would like to practice more with native speakers, and then, so you have to invite people, but it's difficult to organize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also, yeah, going referring to what Jose said, yeah, it so many times comes down to the lone wolf professor saying, yeah, let's do this, I want to have an impact on my students. We also need help from the administration to promote this type of projects, to encourage them through funding. Also, Fernanda, going back to your question, training, because probably, yeah, Jose said that somehow it's a lot of trial and error. Like you're learning the from like mistakes. So okay, so this maybe it's better. Yeah, like we should communicate like this. We should do this instead of this. Proper training, like help from from the administration, and initiatives that like this one's good because we have the opportunity to share what we know, but we
What we
still
do.
need more for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. But I think, yeah, something there you said, Antonio, like the lone wolf, basically, or it could be, like the idea of, maybe I'm going to invite you, you can invite me now, or we can invite Kevin, we can invite Fernanda, but, it's always like the idea of you basically like getting to know people, but it should be like something that, like, I agree with you, Antonio, it's something more, that's part of the institution, like having the unit of, in this case of like international, because most of the agreements, I feel that sometimes they are part of, people's good relationships based on that, which is good, which is good. But we also need the other side, which is something more like part of the institution, the administration, like you said.
Okay. Regarding to the experience that both of you exposed, I'd like to know, what do you think that was the biggest challenge during COVID-19 pandemic? Because both of you have super cool ideas and different ways to show and to present students the intercultural aspects, and also to teach different type of subjects that we have inside a second language acquisition area. But what do you think is the most hard? Yeah, it could be hard. The hard challenge during the pandemic to got all together and try to make a good, I don't know how to say, but a good participation could be.
Yeah, I think, well, I don't know if I can go first.
You have the idea, not the idea, but you have Kevin. But what happens when it is not Kevin?
Yeah, I think that's something, I mean, that's something, that I said at the beginning. What would happen, let's say Kevin in this time, yeah, poor Kevin, like we're using his name so much. But like the idea of him him being, let's say, like super nice, and being able to share his time and let's say expertise. But I think one of the biggest challenges for me was something that I mentioned in the presentation as well, is the idea that we expected people to have access to technology and to know many things about technology. And then when we started teaching, we realized, I mean, in my case, I can just speak for myself, I realized that it was not really like that, I don't know, we had old universities, or people had this idea that we had like an office to work, like some sort of like home studio just to work, and a computer, a camera, and things like that. And I think at the beginning that was challenging, because then we got to the point where people didn't have space to work, or they had to share computers with other members of their families. I don't know if what happened, what was the biggest challenge in your case, Antonio?
Yeah, I totally agree. You made that point throughout your presentation, that like millennials or Gen Zers, like they grew up with a tablet and a phone, so therefore they know how to use technology, or they're good at learning how to like learn how to use different technology tools. And that's not the case also from my end. Yeah, I don't know. I don't wanna like start like saying things about like younger people, the younger generations. But it's also like, it's so many times like you have to say it's on Google that. I mean, there will be a YouTube video. Sit down, watch it. It takes time, so yeah, they're very good at using their apps, but then they need more encouragement, let's say, to learn additional tools.
Yeah, especially if they would like to, for example, there are websites, if you would like to see the pronunciation of a word, you can record your own pronunciation, or you can send a video, like, for example, with a Flipgrid. There are thousands of tools, but you have to spend some time, let's say, to learn them, and let's say to test them, or to see, you know, this is useful for my practice in the case of translation students.
But yeah, go back to the challenge, like motivation, like stay motivated. Yeah, yourself and also the students, like have them, like keep them motivated, because it was a very, very complicated time, and with the edition that we didn't know when this was going to end. So it's like, okay, so maybe next semester we'll be back and spending time with people. Next semester, okay, it's not next semester, and so yeah, the uncertainty was pretty challenging too.
Yeah, and also probably, let's say, well, in my case, I know how to use some tools, but probably I know some of my colleagues who didn't know how to use many tools, like sharing screen or things that are, you know, like part of our vocabulary now, you know, like sharing screen, or like you're muted or unmute yourself and things like that, probably. Breakout rooms, you know, exactly. So those are things that are part of our vocabulary now. But I remember like people, you know, having, or some of my colleagues struggling with that, you know. But again, like this is something, and something that going back to something that Antonio said, is this idea that, and this is something like sort of final reflection for me, which is, you know, these initiatives cannot be part of, you know, that Antonio and I can be friendly and talk to each other and we're academic. No, this is something that has to be like more part of an institution, because now, you know, it doesn't have to be necessarily that, you know, that Fernanda, you sent us an email. So it would be like, okay, let's talk. And now let's talk together and create something cool, which is, you know, which can be the case. But again, it's that requires time and, you know, an effort and energy. And that's something that we don't tend to have much of. Energy. Yeah, we do have that, but, you know, time, that's a little bit complicated. I don't know if you have any other questions, Fernando, or if we...
Her screen's frozen.
I think so. Yeah. So, Antonio, we can talk.
Or she's taking a nap, a long nap.
I'm back. I guess I don't have any other question, but if you want to share something else, maybe your experience, but I guess we said all.
No, I think it's been an interesting, thank you for the invitation, Fernando. It's been, and thank you, Fernando, for your time as well. It's been an interesting conversation, and to see like sometimes, like, again, and with this, I will finish my intervention. We think that we are like, probably we're facing the same problems, let's say in all the countries, like probably the motivation problem or technology problem. We were facing the same type of problems, and actually, I think we're facing the same issues as well. So it's good to have, like, to talk to a professor like Antonio, with his good experiences, and also that, you know, in the areas that his expertise, you know, his areas of expertise, but also like to see that he's probably going through the same issues that we're going through here in South America. So it's not that different, you know, so it's not that so it's always, I mean, it's reassuring. It's not a good thing to see, but we're trying to work and find some solutions to motivate students and also motivate ourselves. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. Yep, totally agree with Jose. And this was itself a intercultural experience for both of us, and we saw our skills developing too. Yeah, from what he said, the skill, you know, there was the skill of interpreting and relating. So yes, we are going through the same things, and I'm in the US, Chile, far away, but then, you know, we are in this global context. We're people, and then interactions, important communication. Then the more we interact, we communicate, the more we realize that we are the same after all.
That's a very philosophical statement, Antonio.
Yeah, I agree with it. How good to end. I can't in a higher note.
Absolutely, I agree with you. So, Fernando and Antonio, thank you very much. Kevin, well, Natalia was also here, but Kevin, thank you very much again. Antonio and Fernando for the invitation.
Thank you, Jose, Fernando, everyone.
Thank you, Kevin.
We'll see you in
Bye,
class.
Kevin.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.